Hello, we're here in the Asia Tech studio in Singapore, where I have lived for the last 9 years. And I'm thrilled that today I'm joined by my mother, Phil, and my Auntie Bernie, who are visiting Singapore for the first time in the whole time I've lived here. So it's been a wonderful week. And Mum, I'm just wondering, what's your impression of Singapore?
Absolutely wonderful. And I felt I was bullied into coming.
Yeah, you were a little
I
bit.
was, yes. Being 82 years of age, it's quite a journey for me. And I feel, oh, my goodness, what an adventure at my age. I've never had the like of it in my life before.
And have you enjoyed it?
I have really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the different cultures and everything to be seen, and so different from England and Ireland. Yes.
And Auntie Bernie, what about you? What do you think of Singapore?
Well, I'm mainly travelled around Europe, so this is my first experience coming out east. And I have to say that I'm pretty overawed by most of the things. Especially, I think it's a good time for us to coming up to the Chinese New Year, and also the lovely festival that we witnessed today. So,
Yes,
yeah, great.
Thaipusam. Yeah, it's been a chaotic sort of merging of colours and fireworks and sights and scenes. And what we thought would be a great idea to do today is perhaps share some family stories, because I think it is quite interesting that as two sisters, there's actually 19 years between you. And Mum, you were born when? And I believe onto a farm?
Yes, I lived on a farm until I was about 7 or 8. And then we moved. My father became a publican, and we lived in Banbridge, County Down. We moved from Cookstown to Banbridge, County Down, and it was a total change for us, running free in the country, and then having, although it was a small town, it was a big change.
Yeah. What did you miss about the farm?
Well, do you know, I can't really remember very much about. I was a war baby, and what I can remember is one of my memories is of the American soldiers during the war visiting our farm to buy eggs and milk, and by that time we had 3 in the family, and we had 3 swings in the barn, and I can remember the American soldiers actually giving us a swing. And giving us chewing gum, which we'd never heard of before, which I know is illegal in Singapore.
Well, to be fair, you can actually chew gum here, but you cannot sell it. So you have to bring in a little stash. But Mum, where was the farm?
The farm was in County Tyrone, near Omagh, which is probably in the centre of County Tyrone, and actually, several years ago, there was a terrible unrest there, and there on the 15th of August, actually, when the town was absolutely full, a bomb went off and killed several people, including children.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that's
Do you
right.
remember that, Bernie?
I do, very well.
Yes, yes, it was. Yes, but that was where the farm was, about 10 miles from there. Yes, so. And I did go to school and had to walk about 3 miles because petrol was rationed. And although we did have a car, one of those little tin Lizzies, and of course you couldn't get petrol. So that was that.
But
So,
that would have been pretty unusual in those days for people to have cars.
well, probably. And you didn't. I don't remember anybody having a bicycle either. You just had to go on foot,
Mm-hmm.
and that was that. So, yes. So we all kept fit, and we were all as skinny as rakes.
And then you'd gone through, obviously, your childhood and young adulthood.
Yes,
And you'd been to school,
yes,
boarding school, I believe.
yes, yes. And I was working in the Northern Ireland Civil Service, and lo and behold, Mum never told us that this little sister was on the way, because you didn't talk about such things in those days. And it was, although we suspected that she was slightly stouter than usual, she was quite a low-set little lady, and we couldn't really notice that she was getting fatter. But all of a sudden, this little sister popped out.
Oh.
Yes, yes.
You should have mentioned about the boarding school, about all of the siblings went to boarding school.
Yes, all of the siblings went to, their secondary education was all in boarding school, because in those days you had to either attend a Protestant or a Catholic school, and the Catholic school, secondary school, wasn't available. You couldn't go on a bus, so you had to board, which wasn't, I mean, you may say, gosh, how did they afford that? But it was just about the same cost as it would be at living at home. So although we had two different uniforms, one for the weekend uniform, and you only got home once a term. Yes, so...
So it wasn't like Hogwarts or Marlbury Towers?
No. we slept 60 to a dorm, and with a nun in a little cubicle, and silence after about 8 o'clock at night. You weren't allowed to speak. So that was that.
Very tough.
Yes.
But your upbringing, Auntie Bernie, so you were actually born 19 years later, and there was 6 siblings between Mum and you.
That's right.
Yeah. But your life started you were born when they were already running the pub, is that right?
That's right. I had quite an interesting start to my life, because in Northern Ireland there is a festival every 12th of July, and my father being a publican, it was a very busy time for him, and unbeknownst to the family, as my sister Phil has said, my mother went into labour, but nobody knew that she was pregnant apart from my father. And my mother said to my brother Seamus, tell Dad to go and fetch the doctor. This was on the 12th of July, and because he was busy in the bar, Seamus sort of looked at my mother and reckoned that there wasn't much wrong with her. And after they had closed up for the day, he said, oh, by the way, Dad, Mum said, can you fetch the doctor? And of course, I popped into the world on the 13th of July, just after midnight.
Oh, so
Yes.
so you were literally born in, just upstairs in the pub.
Upstairs in the bedroom.
Yes.
I think most people were born at home then.
Yes, most people were born at home then, yes.
Yes, not in the
Yes,
hospital.
you got on with it.
Uh-huh.
Yes. Mum said that some of the siblings lower than me were born in a quarter of an hour.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
You see,
Yeah.
there were 7 of us all together,
Yes.
but between me and my brother John, there's
10 years.
10 years.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I think I was a bit of an
Yes.
afterthought.
Uh-huh.
A lovely
little shock.
surprise.
Yes,
lovely surprise,
a little
yes.
shock.
Surprise.
Yes, a great,
Yeah.
great blessing, I may add.
Oh yes.
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 Uh-huh.
Indeed.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so at that time, Mum, you're working in Belfast and commuting back
Yes.
home,
Yes.
and you'd met Dad by then.
No, I hadn't met Dad by then.
Oh.
No. It was another 2 years before I met Dad.
Oh, I thought you'd met him a bit earlier than that.
No, another 2 years. Yes. And he thought very highly of Bernie.
Oh, I'm sure he did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, no, tell us more about how you met John.
Well, I met him at a dance. He actually had asked my friend out.
Oh dear.
And I thought, well, I kind of fancy him, and my friend didn't fancy him. So that was that. So the first date we went for a 3-mile walk.
So basically, you were second best, were you?
Yeah.
I definitely was second best, yes.
And he charmed you with a 3-mile walk.
He did.
He must have been good looking.
Well, yes, your father was very good looking.
Do you think so?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, he was
Yes,
handsome.
he was a
yeah.
handsome man.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't think so, but...
Well, you
anyway.
must have thought
You
there was
must
something
have.
about
You
him.
must have.
Well, I mean, I knew it was no oil painting myself, so... So that was that. So...
And when did you decide to marry?
Well, do you know, I cannot remember him asking me, which is very strange. People remember their proposals and people going down on their knees and doing this and that and the other, and I can't remember that. So obviously it's one of these things you drift into, and I mean we had a 5-year courtship, which I may add was as pure as a lily in the spring.
Of course.
Oh, dear.
In those days there was no such a thing as
Yes.
before marriage.
Well, that's
Yes, you were a wanton woman if you did.
Oh dear.
Yes,
And
yeah.
then you decide when you did marry, you didn't settle in Northern Ireland. You
I actually became, in those days, women in the civil service became redundant immediately they married, which meant I had no job, which I needed a job. So we hot-tailed to England. Yes, actually spent our honeymoon night on a boat, and we settled in Manchester. And the first week I went and signed on for employment, and the next Monday I was working in the probate registry, which is also civil service. So that's where I get my expertise about wills and things like that.
yeah. But
Yeah.
but weren't you supposed to go to Australia?
Yes, we thought, well, we'll try Australia. And in those days, you could get a fare for £10 sterling, and they set you up. It was Sydney that was the port of call, and you got the £10 passage, which included the ship, and which went right away around Africa, because I think the Suez Canal was closed, which took 6 weeks to reach Australia. When you think of today,
That's true.
You've been to Australia a few times, Anne.
Yes, and it took
Took
8 hours, not
yes,
not 6 weeks. Yeah.
Uh-huh. I mean, we had a very stringent medical exam before we were accepted on the £10 travel, and there's quite a lot of people have gone on the £10 and really made very good lives for themselves, and made a lot of money and enjoyed the lifestyle and wouldn't dream of coming back.
Do you have any regrets? Do you wish you'd gone to Australia?
No, I do not, because hot weather and me don't agree. Although cold weather and me don't agree either, but
Yeah.
that's yes. So
Yeah.
Bernie's life took a different turn than mine.
It did, yeah. But I popped out on the scene a couple of years after.
Yes, you popped out. I think 18 months or something after we were married, and then that I didn't work then for 7 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I, when I was about 2, I went to stay with Auntie Bernie, didn't I?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes,
I had a
you did.
blip in the second pregnancy, and she went over, and apparently there's only 8 years between you two.
That's right,
Mhm.
yes. And I was
Yes.
so pleased. I was 10 years old, Anne was 2. and she came over to Northern Ireland.
Yes.
And of course, I was the proud auntie. I took
Yes.
her everywhere.
Yes, you did. And spoiled her rotten.
And spoilt her rotten and put her up to all sorts of tricks and took her to the circus. And
Oh, yeah.
she loved the circus
Did
until the
she?
clowns came out, and then she started to bawl.
Yes.
Oh, dear.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But pretty soon after that, your life then took a really different turn, didn't it? Because Granny and Grandad retired and moved to Belfast.
They did.
And what did that mean to you?
Well, it meant to me, I was getting on quite old. I was 11. So I was at a stage where I was moving from my primary education onto the secondary education. And it was also 2 years before the Troubles in Northern Ireland started. So they actually started in 1969 and lasted until 1998 with the Good Friday Agreement. So it was quite different going from a rural environment into the city. And because I was so young and I was quite gregarious, I was quite happy to go and, make new friends in Belfast.
Yes. Yes, it was, I suppose, the thrill of the new and as you say, a completely different, the urban environment versus the rural environment.
But that was it, yeah.
But it must have been tough because at this stage, everybody else in the family had more or less left home. So you were like an only child at that point.
I was, yes, and unfortunately, because of my age, I slightly rebelled because my parents were quite elderly. My father was born in 1898, so he was 58 years old whenever I was born, at the tail end of the family. My mother was born in 1910, so she was nearly 46 whenever I was born. So that they were sort of getting on a bit, and I was very young. And before that, because they were both in business, they spent most of their time focused on the business, and I had quite a bit of freedom. But whenever they retired and moved to Belfast, all of a sudden they had nothing to concentrate all their energies on apart from me.
Wow. Yes, that
Yes.
must have been. Yes.
It was pretty full on.
Yes. Yes. Suddenly you were.
And no
Yeah.
stories from you.
No,
Yeah.
definitely not. Definitely.
Have you got stories about that moment?
No.
Oh no. She was quite a little princess then, and she didn't do princesses.
Yes, no, I didn't.
No.
I didn't like. Yeah,
No.
But what was it like?
The other thing
Oh,
about
sorry.
her, she got engaged at 17,
Oh.
which Mum and Dad were away on holiday. She was minded by my deceased sister Rose, and Brendan and her went to town and arrived back sporting an engagement ring, which Mum and Dad knew nothing about, and it was a big shock.
Oh. So how did they take it?
not too well initially, but
Yes.
I think at that stage they were sort of happy enough that whenever I got married, that I didn't have to get married if you, if you kept my drift.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But you, I think they wanted you to go to university.
They did. Whenever I went to a school, which wasn't, although it was a grammar school, they weren't really, it wasn't a very academic school. And I sort of decided whenever I came to a certain stage whereby I was going to have to decide what I was going to do in life, I thought to myself, I don't think I could manage to study for another few years. So doing nothing wasn't a choice. So you either had to go out and get a job, or you would go on to uni. And probably, like my sister Phil, I think we were clever enough to head on and go to uni, but Would you have been given the choice, Phil?
No, in my day, actually, Bernie, only about 1 or 2% of my peers did go to uni,
Yeah.
although it's a lot different now.
Yes, but-
Even Anne, in your day, about, I would say 10% went to uni. Is that right?
Yeah, I think it was changing. It was
Yes.
becoming more open when I went, but there were choices at 16 and choices at 18, and so university wasn't the be all and end all. You know,
Yeah.
you had other things that you could be doing,
Mhm.
whereas very soon after that, you know, everybody really, you know, the focus went straight onto, you know, higher education. As opposed to, you know, getting a job.
Yeah.
And I don't think that was necessarily right for everybody. But
No. But you were offered, I mean, it wouldn't have been prohibitive to you from mother and father's point of view. They would have financed you through university.
Oh, yes. I was going to do actually teacher training, and at roughly the same time I was offered the civil service job. I didn't fancy teaching at all, so anyway I chose the civil service, and I never regretted it,
Yeah.
because in later years I worked in a school office, well, for 25 years, and I thought, oh dear, what a thankless job teaching is.
Yeah. So you made the right choice
I
then.
did make the right choice.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Well, I sort of similarly at the time made application because I knew I wasn't going to stay on at school. I applied to the bank and I applied for nursing,
Yes,
and was actually offered both jobs.
yes, you were. I remember that.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I decided once I started weighing up the options, I thought to myself, well, first of all, that nursing would be, it would take quite a few years to get qualified. And not only that, but it would require working on social hours. And because I was quite young and
foolish.
foolish, yes, I decided to go into the bank, but just an ordinary provincial bank in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, you were going to do nursing at one stage.
yes, yeah, I was, and I think because I had places in nursing schools around Manchester, but by the time it came to completing my A levels, I really wanted to leave Manchester. I just felt that, and I'd known for a long time that I wanted to get away, you know, and experience different cities. I just found Manchester very. Look, it was tough. You know, it was the early 80s. You know, it was very. You know, it's the tail end of the industrial, you know, heavy industry. That was all closing down. Unemployment was rising, and there was a real sort of feeling of heaviness, I felt, you know, and of course the weather doesn't help and all of that. It was a pretty miserable place to be. It's not like that anymore. But in that, I felt it was like that for me as an 18-year-old. So a lot of the reason for me not doing nursing was the fact that the schools were in Manchester. And if they hadn't have been, I may well have gone into nursing and probably should have gone into nursing. But I was able to get over, even if it was only just to Liverpool, at 18, and that felt like a liberation at the time.
And getting away from your mother too.
Well,
Yes. I didn't have any restrictions on her. I said, the only restriction is if she brings a young man home, it's different ceilings at night.
oh, chance
Oh,
would have been a
dear,
fine
oh,
thing, yeah.
Dear, oh dear.
dear.
Yes.
Oh, dear. But Auntie Bernie, you never left Belfast,
I never left Belfast, no.
even through all of the troubles and everything you must have experienced. What was that like?
Well, we too, like your mother, considered going to Australia at one stage, but then we sort of had fallen into this rhythm of, you know, we both we were in secure employment. although we were young, we had the opportunity. We saved very hard to buy our first house, which was heavily mortgaged.
Yes.
We went into the house very badly furnished. We relied on people's hand-me-downs and cast-offs. I think we only had one thing new in the house, and that was a cooker. So everything else came second hand. So we were happy to take anybody's curtains, you name it, we took it.
Yes.
And then we just sort of, as we saved and grew older and things changed, we found our lot in life was improving. And although there were a lot of troubles in Northern Ireland and it was a pretty horrible time, we were reasonably cocooned from the whole thing, because it's like a lot of other places. It is a beautiful country. The city of Belfast is a really, really nice city, but there are certain places that are no-go areas. And even to this very day, there are certain parts of the city that I still don't feel too comfortable in.
Well, actually, Michael Palin said that his favourite city in the world is Belfast.
Yeah.
So it really is a good city, but I don't really enjoy it, and my late husband John didn't enjoy it either.
Yes. From my point of view, I think actually it's quite a pretty city. It's a pretty city to approach, especially if you're flying in. You come up Belfast Lough. You have mountains on one side, and you have the Hollywood Hills on the other side. From where I live, within 2 or 3 minutes by car, you can be away up in the hills. You can be around at Stormont, which is where our local government is, and
was.
was, yes, which is supposed to be there, and there are quite extensive grounds. So I mean, there's a lot of greenery around where we are, a lot of green space, which is nice.
I think that's my abiding memories of Belfast are very much around the green spaces, and I think it's got an incredible atmosphere as well. As you say, within minutes you're in quite astonishing countryside, and it's very almost has an unworldly quality about it. I find.
Yeah.
So
No, it is a lovely place. As I say, the only thing that probably might be of interest in this, and I mean, I could labour it on for hours, were the actual troubles in Northern Ireland, whereby there was a lot of civil unrest. And unfortunately, in my instance, I was witness to a murder. And one of my colleagues was shot dead, getting out of a car beside me. And I was involved in all of the stuff that went on from that. So that would be a pretty unpleasant sort of memory for me. It happened in 1980, and so it's quite a while ago, but it wasn't uncommon between bombs and people being shot, and obviously the different factions from the Protestant side and the Catholic side, and then the British Army in between, which was caught in the middle, plus the Northern Ireland Police.
Yeah, and you just lived in the eye of the storm and got on with your life. And
well, I wouldn't say in the eye of the storm. It was there. You weren't always aware of it, but it was pretty unpleasant at times.
I always remember, Mum, life for us, obviously removed and in Manchester in the 70s and early 80s, the time I lived there, it was very much, our lives were about the news and listening to the news. And, it was always, and the lead story almost inevitably was something about Northern Ireland.
Yeah, and I think probably because of the threat that it posed to mainland Britain, it was always there.
Yes.
It was very difficult for people living in England, where that could have been targeted at any stage.
Yes, actually, I find people from the Irish Republic don't have any idea what went on in Northern Ireland. I'm really amazed by that. People that I've met in Manchester, you know, ex-Republic of Ireland, they know nothing about the political situation, and I'm very surprised at that.
Well, let's face it, I think nobody really wanted Northern Ireland.
No,
I think there's still
No.
nothing has changed in that respect.
No.
I mean, it really is. I mean, it's a very contentious thing, isn't it, to say that it exists almost. I mean, it has such a separate identity, and when there's so many factions trying to make it part of their identity, either the Republic of Ireland or the United Kingdom, and Northern Ireland stubbornly retains a very independent spirit, regardless of the two.
It does, but as I say, I think neither the United Kingdom want us, nor I think the Republic of Ireland would be a total thorn in the side of any of the two. It's just that the people in Northern Ireland are pretty entrenched in the past, and they more or less think that they can decide their own destiny. But I think eventually things will correct in the long term, and an Irish identity will probably be the route that will be followed.
But Irish identity as part of the island of Ireland, or an identity almost independent of that, although Irish?
No. It'll never be independent. I can't see that, because first of all, Northern Ireland cannot sustain itself politically. There's we cannot. We live largely on a lot of subsidies coming into the country, so I can't see us ever being independent. We have a sort of mix in the place that roughly 50% of the population now consider themselves to be Irish, and 50% consider themselves to be British. So at some stage, because it's sort of always assumed that Catholics will sort of outbreed, sorry for want of a better word, Protestants, that eventually the Irish identity will take over.
And do you think that will be, on the whole, harmonious?
I can't see it ever being totally harmonious, because it's like all unrest in a lot of countries. You might have 95% of people who want to live in harmony, and you have 5% who don't. The 5% will always dictate, because if you've got a man standing with a gun over a stadium of people, he is the man with the power.
Yes. One bad apple gets rid of a barrel of apples, isn't that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a constant battle to try and make it work and get these people, sort of, well, the next generation maybe not being so faction orientated.
I think to be quite honest, there's so much apathy in the place, and there's no appetite. So most people tend to, I mean, like, speaking for myself, and I'm not proud of the fact, I mean, for many years I didn't bother voting. I thought to myself, well, what's the point in it, really? My vote can't influence anything here. But sorry, that's very narrow-minded.
I never had a vote, although I left Northern Ireland when I was 25. I never had a vote.
Whenever you were there?
When I was there, no. I think it was only householders that had a vote.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, it was awful, yes. Mind you, like you, Bernie, I wouldn't have bothered to vote because I knew the outcome.
It was pretty pointless.
It was pointless, yes, exactly. So, anyway, that was that. So,
yeah. But you've enjoyed your life in Manchester.
Oh yes, and I have voted for all three parties at some stage in my life. Not given a hoot about, but I think nowadays with Brexit and what not all, I think I'll have to think carefully about who I vote for.
Indeed you will.
I will, yes.
Yeah.
And poor Theresa May. I feel so sorry for her. Nobody else feels sorry for her, but I do.
Yes, that's probably very charitable, I would say. Yeah.
Yes, I think everybody else wants rid of her, but who do you put in her place?
I know.
I mean,
Yeah.
that buffoon Boris Johnson. Yes, because he really is a buffoon, isn't he?
Well, he is, yes.
Well, he's
Yeah.
trying. He's certainly working on that impression. I mean, oh my goodness.
Well, he's certainly working on trying to wangle his way into number 10, but
Yes. Well, I don't think he will.
cannot see that happening.
No, neither
course.
can I. Perhaps, you know, when there was a leadership contest all those years ago, well, a couple of years ago, when he removed his, whatever it is, his candidacy
yes.
from the three, I think that was the end of him as a political leader. What do you think?
I don't really think much about Boris, so and I really do. I really cannot stand all this stuff about Brexit. I know
No.
how I cast my vote. I'm not in agreement with a lot of stuff that's happening.
No.
And I think I've lost the will to live with the whole thing.
Well, so
I think
so
everyone's just thoroughly worn out with it.
Absolutely.
we are worn.
thoroughly
I
worn out.
can't think that it will be finalised on the 29th of March.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, it's like all of these long battles in, even the whole question around Northern Ireland, the question around Brexit. They just go on and on and on, and people argue and argue and argue. And in the end, the general population do become apathetic because they think, what
Absolutely.
is the point? My opinion is not being, or I can't see any way of this
Actually,
working.
what I think the mistake was made when they didn't tell people all the details before we were able to vote.
Phil, the place was awash with information. People just chose to ignore it.
Yes, I suppose
I mean,
you're
I
right.
really do think the thing was sort of well publicised and people took out of it what they want. There were a few sort of key points being made and
Yes,
people honed in on that, and that was it.
you're right, Bernie. Yes, yes. But to tell you the truth, I didn't give a hoot.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't have imagined myself voting for Brexit.
No.
No.
We wanted to remain in Europe.
Yes, we wanted to remain.
Yeah.
You know, when you're allies, you don't fight each other. And I've
Yeah,
lived
it's
through the
certainly-
last
yeah.
World War.
Yes, that's right.
Yes,
So you were, yeah.
we don't want any more wars like that. So
That's right.
yes, so
Yeah.
that's that. So
So I think that's probably brought us to a really nice ending and some lovely, some interesting stories about how, lives of, certainly your two lives have been very different in different areas, in different geographies.
yes,
And at different times in history as well. And yeah.
But maybe sort of on a nice note to end it off, my sister and I are very, very close.
yes,
We have for years and years, every Sunday. We always speak on it used to be on the phone for about
Yes.
an hour every Sunday.
yes,
And now that we've sort of dragged her into the 21st century, she FaceTimes, as you know, she FaceTimes you
she
too.
FaceTimes me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So quite often the hour can go into an hour and a quarter until sister decides that I'm dismissed. right, Byrne, I have to go and put the bins out now.
no, but she absolutely bullies me into this technology. Press this button and do this and do that.
Oh,
And
yes.
of course I'm,
Yes, I can't get it to work today. What
No,
do I do?
no,
Do
no.
this, do that.
yes. And what do you do when everything goes off?
Yeah.
You have to
Reboot.
Reboot.
Turn it off and
and
turn it on
reboot.
again.
Oh my goodness! Could I find where I rebooted? I felt like booting the whole thing out.
So back to Singapore. This all started off as my sister saying to me, "Would you not think of going out to see our Anne?" And I said, "Well, I tell you what, I'll go out if you go out." And she said, "Well, I'll go out if you go out." And that's how it all started. And here we
Yes.
are in
Yeah.
Singapore.
Yes,
And here we are indeed from Stretford to
Brentford,
Singapore, from
yes.
Strangford in Northern Ireland to Singapore, and
Yes.
it's been a wonderful week. And thank
Yes.
you both. And
Oh,
I
no,
know it's a
thank
long
you.
thoroughly
journey.
enjoyed it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Lovely Singapore.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Brilliant.
Yes, lovely
Yes.
Singapore. Thank
Yes.
you.
And if it's 20 years younger, yes.